Welcome back for day 2 of our deep dive. Remember that bottle of pain reliever you mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
Well, today, we're going behind the scenes, exploring the FDA's role in making sure that medication and countless others are safe and effective. You've asked us to explain the FDA's role in drug development and regulation in the United States, so we'll be diving into their mission, structure, and those crucial regulatory pathways like IND and NDA submissions.
It's fascinating, really. The journey from a scientist's initial idea all the way to a drug landing in your medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
And the FDA is involved every step of the way.
And get this, in prepping for our deep dive today, I was going through Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay.
And let me tell you, the FDA's reach goes way beyond what I expected.
Oh.
Of course, they're focused on those big-name prescription drugs, but they're also keeping an eye on things like food additives and even cosmetics.
You're absolutely right. Think of it this way. The FDA's mission is to protect public health, and that covers a lot of ground. When it comes to food, for example, they're making sure factories are clean enough to prevent contamination. They're essentially the guardians of safe food production.
So it's like they're ensuring your favorite snack doesn't come with a side of unwanted bacteria.
Exactly. And the same goes for dietary supplements. They want to be sure what's on the label is actually in the bottle and that it's produced safely.
It's interesting how they walk that line with supplements, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're not approving them as drugs, but they're making sure they're not just snake oil either.
Precisely. They have to strike a balance between giving consumers choices and protecting them from potentially harmful products. And let's not forget cosmetics.
Right.
That new lipstick you love. The FDA has checked that too, making sure the ingredients aren't secretly toxic.
Wow, I never realized how much the FDA impacts our daily lives.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
From the food we eat to the products we put on our skin.
Mm.
But let's zoom in on the prompt you gave us about their role in drug development, especially those key regulatory pathways. You mentioned like IND and NDA submissions. Those always sounded a bit like alphabet soup to me.
They can seem that way, but imagine drug development as a carefully mapped road trip. And the FDA is like your GPS, making sure you take the right route to reach your destination, a safe and effective drug.
Okay, I'm liking this road trip analogy. So where does this journey begin?
It all starts with an idea, a potential new drug. But before it can even be tested in humans, developers need to gather a ton of preclinical data showing the drug's effects in the lab and on animals.
Okay.
This helps establish basic safety and provides an initial understanding of how the drug works.
So before a drug even gets near a human, there's already a ton of research and testing going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely.
But what happens next? Where does the FDA come in?
That's where the IND comes in, the Investigational New Drug Application. It's like getting permission to start your road trip. The developers submit a huge package of information to the FDA, including all that preclinical data, detailed plans for clinical trials, even the qualifications of the investigators running the trials.
Wow, so before any human even sees this drug, the FDA is already digging deep. What are they looking for in that IND that's so crucial? Are they looking for any red flags that might suggest the drug is too risky to even test on humans?
Exactly. They're evaluating everything from the manufacturing process to the study design, making sure everything meets their rigorous standards for safety and scientific validity. It's like the FDA is checking your car's engine, brakes, and navigation system before you set off on your road trip.
Right.
They want to make sure you have the best possible chance of reaching your destination safely.
That makes a lot of sense. So if the FDA gives the IND the green light, the journey continues to clinical trials.
Right.
I know you can't cover everything about clinical trials in a few minutes.
No.
But can you give us a taste of how the FDA is involved in that process?
Our sources, E10 and E11, dive into the specifics of clinical trial guidelines. Okay. And what's fascinating here is the international collaboration involved. The ICH, or International Council for Harmonization, plays a crucial role in developing guidelines for conducting clinical trials, ensuring consistency and quality across different countries.
So it's not just the FDA setting the rules.
Yeah.
It's a global effort.
Exactly. The ICH brings together regulatory authorities and pharmaceutical industry experts from all over the world to develop harmonized guidelines for drug development, including the design, conduct, and reporting of clinical trials.
That makes sense. Drug development is a global endeavor, so having those shared standards is essential for efficiency and safety. But what happens after years of research? Countless hours of work, mountains of data.
After years of clinical trials, that's when the NDA is submitted, the new drug application. It's like reaching your destination and presenting your travelogue to the FDA.
Okay.
This document is massive, filled with every detail from all those clinical trials.
It sounds like the FDA is looking at the entire trip, not just the destination. They want to see the whole journey the drug has taken and how it's performed along the way. But what exactly are they looking for in that huge NDA?
They're meticulously reviewing everything from the drug's benefits and risks to its manufacturing process and proposed labeling. The FDA wants to see the whole picture of this drug, not just that it works, but how it works in the body, how it's made consistently, and what risks it might pose. They're looking for any missing pieces or inconsistencies that could signal a problem.
So they're making sure you haven't taken any shortcuts or detours on your journey. It's reassuring to know they're being so thorough, especially when it comes to something as important as the medications we take.
And their work doesn't end there. But we'll delve into that after a quick.
Hold on, before we move on, you mentioned earlier that the FDA's reach extends beyond just prescription drugs. We've got some interesting sources about specific FDA regulations, like those regarding electronic signatures and tamper-evident packaging. Let's unpack those before we move on to the next stage of the drug's journey. I'm really curious about how those seemingly small details fit into the big picture.
You're right, those are important aspects of FDA regulation. Let's dive into those next. You know, it's fascinating. The FDA's involvement with a drug doesn't stop even after it's approved and on the market.
That's right. It's like the road trip continues even after you've reached your destination.
Yeah.
You mentioned post-market surveillance before we left.
Right.
Our sources, E2C and E2E,
Yeah.
actually give a pretty good overview of how the FDA keeps tabs on a drug's safety even after it's available to the public.
Yeah.
It's like they're checking in to see how your car's performing on the open road, not just during the test drive.
Exactly. Think of it as ongoing quality control. The FDA wants to make sure a drug's safety and effectiveness hold up in the real world, where it's being used by a much wider range of people than in those controlled clinical trials.
Yeah.
They have several ways of doing this. Doctors, pharmacists, and even patients themselves can report any adverse events directly to the FDA.
So it's like a feedback loop with information flowing back to the FDA from all those who are actually using the drug.
Exactly.
But how does the FDA make sense of all that data? Do they have a team of super sleuths poring over reports looking for clues?
Well, they do have a team of experts, and they use some pretty sophisticated tools to analyze all that incoming data. Drug manufacturers are also required to monitor and report any safety concerns. And the FDA actively analyzes data from a variety of sources looking for patterns or signals that might indicate a problem. One of the tools they use is something called a PBRE.
Our source, E2C, mentioned the PBRER. I have to admit, that one really stumped me. What's that all about?
The PBRER, or Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report, is a comprehensive document that drug manufacturers have to submit to the FDA at regular intervals. It's kind of like a regular checkup for the drug. It summarizes all the safety data collected on a drug since its approval. This includes any new findings from ongoing clinical trials, post-marketing studies, and those spontaneous reports we talked about.
So it's like a progress report, helping the FDA stay on top of any potential issues that might emerge once the drug is out in the wild.
Exactly.
But what happens if the FDA does find a problem? Do they just send the drug manufacturer back to the drawing board?
Well, it depends on the severity of the problem. They might require updates to the drug's labeling, add new warnings, or even in rare cases, withdraw a drug from the market if serious safety concerns arise.
That's reassuring to know. The FDA isn't just giving a drug a thumbs up and then forgetting about it. They're constantly evaluating and reevaluating, making sure the medications we're taking are as safe as they can be. It's like they're keeping an eye on the road conditions, even after you've started your trip, ready to reroute you if necessary.
Absolutely. And part of that ongoing evaluation involves classifying drugs into different categories, which has a big impact on how they're regulated and accessed by patients.
Right.
You asked us about the difference between over-the-counter and prescription drugs.
Oh, yeah.
And we also have some information about the GRES classification.
Yes, those different classifications always confuse me. Can you break them down for us? What are the key factors that determine whether a drug ends up as over-the-counter, prescription, or something else entirely?
Let's start with over-the-counter or OTC drugs.
Yeah.
These are medications the FDA has deemed safe enough for consumers to use without a doctor's prescription. Think of it this way. For an OTC drug, the FDA is confident you can navigate the road yourself, using the information on the label as your guide. They have specific regulations for these drugs, making sure they're properly labeled with clear instructions and warnings so people can use them safely and effectively. CFR 21, Part 310, actually lists many of the active ingredients allowed in OTC drugs for different conditions, like cough and cold remedies or pain relievers.
So for OTC drugs, the FDA is essentially saying, we trust you to handle this one on your own.
Right.
But what about those drugs that require a prescription? What makes them different?
Prescription drugs are those that need a doctor's order because they might be more potent, have a higher risk of side effects, or need to be carefully monitored by a healthcare professional. It's like the FDA is saying, for this trip, you'll need a co-pilot, someone with the expertise to guide you. The FDA has a much more rigorous approval process for these medications, as we discussed earlier, with those IND and NDA submissions.
That makes sense. Prescription drugs are like venturing off-road. You need an expert navigator to help you through the rough terrain.
Exactly.
But what about this GRAS classification I saw in our sources?
Oh, yeah.
That one sounds a bit more appetizing.
GRAS stands for Generally Recognized as Safe.
Okay.
It applies to substances added to food, not drugs themselves. CFR GRAS lists various substances that have a long history of safe use and are generally considered safe by experts. These substances don't need to go through the same pre-market approval process required for food additives.
So it's like the FDA is saying this ingredient has been on the road for so long, it has a proven track record. They don't need to scrutinize it as closely. But even with all these different classifications, the FDA is still involved in ensuring safety, whether it's through labeling requirements for OTC drugs or evaluating the safety of those GRAS substances.
Exactly. It all goes back to their core mission of protecting public health. They're taking a multi-pronged approach, tailoring their regulatory oversight to the specific risks and benefits of different types of products. It's like having different types of maps and navigation systems depending on the complexity of your journey.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from preclinical research and clinical trials to specific regulations like electronic signatures and tamper-evident packaging. And we've seen how the FDA's role continues even after a drug is approved, with ongoing monitoring and different classification systems. It's amazing how much work goes into ensuring the safety and effectiveness of the medications we use.
Yeah, it really is incredible.
But I have a feeling we're not done yet, are we?
You're right. There's still so much more to explore, but let's pause here for a moment to gather our thoughts.
Yes, we'll be back in a flash to wrap things up and leave you with something to ponder as you continue your own exploration of the fascinating world of the FDA. We're back.
And ready to wrap up our deep dive into the FDA.
It's been quite the journey. We started with that simple prompt about the FDA's role in drug development and regulation, and ended up exploring everything from food additives to cosmetics to those intricacies of clinical trials.
It really is a lot.
Along the way, we've learned the FDA's mission goes way beyond just approving new drugs.
Oh, for sure.
They're constantly monitoring drug safety, classifying medications, and working to ensure the integrity of that whole drug development process.
Right.
From the initial research all the way to a drug's use by patients.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And it's clear they're committed to protecting public health by ensuring the safety and effectiveness of the medications we rely on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say, before this deep dive, I kind of took those little pills in my medicine cabinet for granted.
Oh, yeah.
But now I have a newfound appreciation for all the work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure those medications are safe and do what they're supposed to do.
That's a key takeaway I hope our listeners will keep in mind.
Oh.
Every time you take a medication, whether it's an over-the-counter pain reliever or a prescription drug,
Right.
the FDA has been there every step of the way, evaluating the science, scrutinizing the data, and making sure the benefits outweigh the risks.
It's really remarkable when you think about it.
It is.
This one agency is responsible for safeguarding the health of millions of people by ensuring the quality of their medications. And they're doing it across this vast, constantly evolving landscape of scientific discovery and technological advancement.
And that brings us to an important question.
Yeah.
With all the new technologies emerging, how will the FDA adapt to ensure the safety and efficacy of the next generation of medications?
That's a great question to ponder. As we move forward in this era of personalized medicine, artificial intelligence,
Oh, wow.
gene editing, the FDA's role will undoubtedly become even more complex and challenging.
It's a challenge they've met before, though.
Right.
Adapting to those new scientific breakthroughs and evolving their regulatory approaches to keep pace with the changing world of medicine. And I'm confident they'll continue to do so, using their expertise and commitment to public health to guide them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the FDA, we want to leave you with a final thought. Remember, that the next time you reach for that bottle of medication, there's a whole world of science, regulation, and oversight behind it.
Yeah.
And at the heart of it all is the FDA, working tirelessly to ensure those medications are safe, effective, and available to those who need them.
It's a vital role.
Yeah.
Often unseen, but always essential. And it's something worth appreciating and understanding as we navigate this complex and ever-changing world of health and medicine.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.